Kengo, could we start with perhaps some discussion of how this project arose, so how the New Canaan House came about for you?
I got the commission directly from the client. This is and I don't know her before that project. Suddenly I got an email from her. And I was so excited to hear because that is New Canaan, so it's very close from Philip Johnson's Glass House. And Glass House is, as I think, is very important house. As the location of my project is very similar to as a condition of Glass House. It's in the beautiful forest. I'm very happy to hear that.
Kengo, how did you approach the relationship to the site? The fact that it's a very beautiful landscape, but it's also a site of some historical significance because of the concentration of mid-century modern houses there, including Philip Johnson's Glass House.
Yeah, what I did for the site is to show the contrast from Philip Johnson's attitude to the site. Interestingly, Philip Johnson, his idea is touching the ground. As a big difference from Miss van der Looy approach to the site is the Farnsworth house of Miss van der Looy and totally floating on the glass. This is some gap between the ground and the Miss van der Looy house. But Philip Johnson's house was standing on the ground, touching the ground. But what I did there is one part is touching the ground, one part is totally floating on the valley. It's different from Philip Johnson, different from Miss van der Looy as well. My attitude is a respect condition. This is coming from my philosophy for architecture. So always respect the condition and respect the place. And I want to show the difference of my as a method from Philip Johnson method and the Miss van der Looy method. And then that project is very important for me.
A question for the both of you, Kengo, Erieta. Could you tell us how this working relationship between the two of you began?
Because I was a visiting scholar at Columbia University in the year 2001, when I first came across with one of the publications at Avery Library. And I talked about it with Kenneth Frampton, and he said, look, if you want really to meet the architect, you have to go to Tokyo. And after US, I was an archaeological photographer for 12 years. So I was working at Knossos Palaces when I said, look, I can't continue anymore. I have to go and find this guy. And that was in 2001, November. And I talked to Kengo about the glass house in Atami. And that was the beginning, actually, where it has taken us for the next 14 years to work together, 13 years.
Erieta, you've talked sometimes about some affinities between your own approach and Kengo's approach in architecture. Perhaps both of you could speak about what you've seen in each other's work that maybe you can relate to.
Even without studying the philosophy of design of Kengo's philosophy, as I was a landscape photographer, I would understand architecture through the landscape itself. So I would see architecture as landscape. And instead of isolating it and instead of extracting it from nature, I would see it as one. And when I saw the work of Kengo, that was one of the reasons which made me arrive to him, because I was fascinated by this notion that there is no object there anymore. It's the landscape itself, it's the world itself. And it's all part of it, it's one thing. So that was my fascination, without forcing it, without pushing it, without thinking about any specific method. It's all happening naturally from my own side. The fact that I was prior to that, an archaeological photographer for 12 years, where I worked in many excavation sites and under earth tombs, where the remains of a building you would see in relation to the landscape. So my eye was trained to capture ruins or remains of a building and how they are related to the landscape, because the landscape in antiquity was very important and where it was positioned, located. So I was trained since very early age as a professional to understand and capture architecture as part of the landscape because of my relation to antiquities. So, and when I saw the first work of Kengo, the glass house in Atami, for me was the absolute fascination ever, and still remains the absolute one. The openness, and that you can isolate yourself, but in the same time you are out there in nature, one thing, experiencing the environment, the context. I would reflect and see the work of, for example, Matthias Klotz or Smiljan Radic as ruins in a way, even pieces of contemporary architecture. In the work of Kengo, I don't see this. I see the landscape itself. So it's another level of communicating and being in relation to the landscape.
It's very different from the method of other photographers shooting the project as an isolated object. But she carefully pick up the quality of the place. But still is the image of the house. But the protagonist is landscape itself. That is exactly what I'm intending in the design of that house.
I understand that the photographs really do capture these atmospheres, these moments in the projects, about other architect-photographer pairings, like Hervé and Corbusier, Schulman and Eames. Here in Australia, Max Dupain and Harry Seidler. Often there is something about the way the photographer is approaching the architecture and what the architect is trying to achieve in the work that seems to click.
Kengo's work, I mean, recently I was in Kyushu photographing an incredible work of architecture where every moment was a fascination and discovery. You would see the architecture unfolding in different moments of the light, and seeing so many layers of space, which is incredible for me. It's a kind of a journey throughout the day and every day. So it's a rare thing, and I photograph for so many architects around the world. So it's an incredible journey through spaces within one building, for example. It gives you all these incredible images. The incredible world.
You both have an interest in the way architecture can merge with its environment, the way it can dissolve or disintegrate. Can I ask what that relationship between architecture and an environment means to you?
When I visit the site, I saw the big trees, big tall trees. There's a vertical lines of big tall trees, and one strong line is the order. I like the rhythm. It's different from the forest in Japan, and the New Canon natures probably is only for New Canons. So architecture, the design have the conversation with that kind of nature, I believe. So we can create the continuous move from nature to the interior. It is not separated. It is gradually shifting from the wildness to the intimate. And finally, the house looks like melting in the beautiful forest and the beautiful valley.
Erieta, it seems that it was really important in this project because of the architecture and the way that you were trying to capture, that there was a series of photographs, that this wasn't about one iconic image.
I went to visit the site and I realized that it's impossible to photograph it in 1 or 2 days or even 3 days, because the forest land there, which is a very characteristic and typical condition of the Connecticut and New Canaan, as you said, it's so the atmosphere is so strong there. It's, I mean, I arrived and it was late fall, so it was amazing. You felt in the houses you were floating in the forest. So that was the beginning for me to decide, in combination, of course, with the architectural quality and the site itself, that I have to capture it in the seasonal changes and how architecture is related to the seasonal changes, that actually it becomes one thing moving with the seasons, adapting the colors of the nature in every specific season. Either it's winter with a snowstorm, or it's in the fall with the red trees, or, you know. In certain moments of the day, the house totally disappears. And what you see is the ceiling and the floor, the wooden structure, where it's the horizontal movement, and then you have the verticality of the trees, which is, again, is from the same material, is wood. So you see actually the wooden floor and the ceiling floating, and creating this dialogue with the verticality of the trees, because the rest disappears in certain moments of the day, and it's usually this happens in the late afternoon hours, and that's why I had decided to photograph against the sunlight, towards the sunset, where totally you lose the glass as a material disappears. So it's an amazing moment for the house.
According to the change of direction of light, and the shadow is changing, and the color of shadow is changing, and probably, so what she found in that house disappearing, the effect can come from the kind of detail. We carefully made that detail. The clients, she didn't want to have any curtains on the wall. I have respect for decision, and then the exterior, the interior is totally merging. She totally understands what I designed for that house.
Kengo, did Erieta's photography reveal something to you about your own architecture?
The influence from the photographer is probably very important for us. Sometimes show as a reflection on the glass and the beautiful shadow in the building. She can find the appropriate timing for the shadow and for the reflection. And that effect can teach me what should I do for the total space. And sometimes it's just following the architectural solution. What she showed me is the relationship between the environment actually itself. And sometimes it was very shocking for us. Oh, this kind of effect really happened in the house. And then after that, for the next project, I tried to achieve that kind of special effect between those two things.
But it's interesting because actually I see what you have designed. I just present you what you have designed.
But I was surprised to see,
It's like the, as I say, it's the visual translation of the architectural design, which is a surprising moment for the architect, but actually the architect is the one who thought about it to begin with.
Time seems really critical to understanding the house and the photography.
Yeah, for me, what's happened after the completion is very important. Sometimes the material we use for the building is aging beautifully after the completions, and also the building is getting better and better after the construction. That is very different from the iconic the towers. The beginning is beautiful, but that building is designed for the beginning of the project. But for my building, the time after the completion of the building is more important. She can show what happens afterward, and then it's a very exciting the experience for us to see what happened after that.
The life of the building, somehow,
yes.
if we can call it this way.
Yes, yes, it's the phrase.
Because the building has a life and
Yes.
and death as well.
Yeah, I like that kind of the life itself.